What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? Dan and Grant Hughes are back, coming at you with an emergency, totally unplanned, off the cuff, as I hear myself echo in the background because something's open. Please let me, this is emergency podcasting at its finest. But we're here. Donovan Mitchell was traded, and it was not to the New York Knicks. How about that? We will get into the details of the package momentarily. But Grant, actually, let's get into the details of the package now.
Yeah.
Cleveland is sending Utah Colin Sexton, who is now getting a $72 million 4-year deal in a sign and trade, Larry Marketing, Ochai Agbaji, who was drafted a lottery pick this past year. Then they're getting 3 unprotected first-round picks in 25, 27, and 29, plus pick swaps in 26 and 28. As Woj noted, along with the Rudy Gobert trade, Utah has now gathered 13 lightly or unprotected first-round picks through 2029. Just absolutely wild stuff. There's so much to hit here between the Jazz and the Cavs. We have 40 minutes to do so. I think the Knicks have to come up as well. But Grant, what are your initial thoughts on all of this?
Surprise was the first one, obviously. I didn't hear anything. I don't know if you did about the Cavs being, now there's all this reporting coming out about, there were talks a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and that was not on my radar. Maybe that's because I'm checked out for the summer, but I don't think that was out there. I guess the first question that sort of comes to mind is, it's all the Cleveland side for me. You're right. There is a Knicks angle to this and a Jazz angle, but the core question to me is, how much better does this make the Cavs, right? Because they were not in, the upper tier of the East last year. I think there was good reason to expect that they might get there just organically. I'm a huge believer in Evan Mobley. I think Darius Garland's really good. Jared Allen's really good. That, there was a great core there. They could have gotten a lot better without doing this. And so I think you have to consider what might have been possible without Mitchell and weigh that against how much better they might be. And unfortunately, the answer is we're not sure. I think I'll toss it to you in a second here, but I think the most interesting aspect of this trade is that the Cavs, as constructed now, kind of have there's a lot of nuance, but they're kind of not that different from the Jazz teams that Mitchell played on with Rudy Gobert, because you have, dominant interior defense. Cleveland was 6th in defensive rating last year per cleaning the glass. I don't know that you can say any, Mobley and Allen or any other unit is as much of a defense unto themselves as Gobert was unto himself. And now you've got a couple small guards with that, both of whom are defensively suspect. I think Mitchell, if anyone ever figures out what happened to the Louisville version of Donovan Mitchell, who kind of got picked on the strength of his defense and not his high usage scorer capabilities, that'd be great. So there's even a little bit of Lillard, McCollum, Portland Trailblazers here. What's the ceiling on a team like that with 2 small guards? It's just really interesting. I think Cleveland is potentially quite a bit better, but I also think that the reason it might be quite a bit better is because of organic growth and less because they've introduced a 25 points per game scorer to the equation. Maybe that sells Mitchell short, but I think it's very interesting to consider the similarities to the Utah team. And then, if you're the Cavs, right, you've given up a ton of draft equity. And if it's true that your ceiling is the last 5 years of the Jazz, in which more than once, they were absolutely dominant during the regular season, do the Cavs take that? Because remember, this is Cleveland, right? This is a team that never did anything in 30 years without LeBron James being involved. And so if you're saying you might be a 55, 60 win team and have some playoff issues because your guards can't defend anybody, I wonder if Cleveland would take that. So there's a lot more to unpack, but that's kind of my initial set of sort of disjointed thoughts on the whole deal.
My only thoughts now from Big Boy on YouTube: fewer picks than Gobert. I bet Mitchell's not happy about that. That's the only correct take here. Mitchell has already tweeted about being excited to play with Darius Garland. It's weird that I might be a lot higher on the Cavs now than you are, because I guess I don't see the similarities in Utah, just because did he ever have someone who could generate a shot next to him like Garland can? Right. And I think the upgrade from Sexton is substantial when you're looking at from scratch offense. Sexton got pretty good at driving and decision making there, and a good off the catch 3-point shooter. Donovan Mitchell shot 36% on off the dribble threes this past year. He's had stretches, including in the postseason, where he has shot way higher than that. And so to have that other off the dribble shot making element, when we saw that was kind of what they were missing later in the season, and without really touching your core, because Jared Allen, and Evan Mobley are all of a sudden still here. This team, I think, automatically vaults into the top 4 of the Eastern Conference discussion. I don't trust the Nets in the short term. So you have Milwaukee, Boston for sure there. I think Philly, Toronto, and Brooklyn are all kind of then like up for debate. I'm okay. Look, the asking price was steep. And this is also, if you're Utah, what's interesting is you don't know if Donovan Mitchell wants to be in Cleveland long term. Right. And so you're shorting Cleveland's future. Not like kind of like, if he went to New York, you could say, oh, the Knicks picks will be good no matter what because they're the Knicks. But you knew that Mitchell was going to stay in New York, sort of adding the element where 2 of these unprotected picks and then 2 of the swaps post date Mitchell's current contract is huge for the Jazz. And I say that as a point to make that Cleveland gave up a shit ton here, but I dig it. It's sort of in the same vein as Minnesota, where it's, are you rushing to coronate what Evan Mobley was? At the same time, like Allen and Garland were just all-stars. Right. You just maxed out Darius Garland. Jared Allen's in the middle of a deal that does not look, we killed that deal in real time, but it doesn't look expensive anymore. I appreciate this team going for it. You touched on this though, where the concern like does sort of bear out is, well, how do you get any better from here and surround them with the requisite pieces? I mean, to be fair, like Kevin Love still in Cleveland. And I think Larry Markkinen was good. That's just not a loss to me. And if you're going from Mitchell to Sexton, I just think Mitchell is a clear upgrade. If there's not like a universe between them on offense because of just how I trust Donovan Mitchell off the dribble, there's clear separation. So Isaac Okoro is still there. Kevin Love is still there. And Ricky Rubio now is still there. And by the way, and Karis LeVert, but Ricky Rubio, like there are now lineups where like any guard that you put alongside Rubio, who's not Karis LeVert now, whether it's Garland or Mitchell, they're great fits all of a sudden alongside Ricky Rubio. And now you sort of have Karis LeVert hanging here. If he has a good year, is he a trade asset or is he just another layer of offensive creation for you? This team is not without depth right now. Projecting forward, sure. How do you get better? But like you get better because you've just invested in all these awesome young players. You get better because Evan Mobley goes from transcendent defender to two-way superstar. You get better because Darius Garland is not done developing. You get better because Donovan Mitchell hasn't even technically entered his prime yet. So I think and look, we have a lot of people in the YouTube comments are saying like the Cavs got fleeced. Utah scored more draft picks here. And we can get into the Utah element of this, but I wanted to focus on the Cavs first. Like, do you think that they have tethered themselves to sort of this like sub contention ceiling moving forward? Or do you buy into the idea that this core has that pinnacle, even if it's not next year?
No, I guess I was just asking the question more. I think that, so you listed the teams earlier that, depending on how you feel about Brooklyn, I think Boston, Milwaukee, Philadelphia are clearly better. It seems, right? Because I think it's probably fair to argue that maybe with the exception of Boston, the Cavs have so much priced in upside because of the youth of their key players, right? Like you could, if one or two of Mobley and Garland take a leap, then like all bets are off. I don't know what the East hierarchy looks like. Atlanta got better. I think we both agree on that. And Cleveland was slightly ahead of Atlanta in point differential last year. I think it's going to be a big mess. I think maybe what this means is there are 5 or 6 really good teams in the East now, and not just 4. I don't know where I slot the Cavs in that. I think they're very competitive with all those teams potentially. And again, Mitchell, I think was the right type of sign. I think we harped on, okay, wouldn't it be great if when we were doing our offseason grades and just generally talking about the Cavs, we harped on like, wouldn't it be great if there was just a stud two-way wing here? And I think there's still an absence of that. But what did happen was the offense that ranked 19th in the league last year added Donovan Mitchell. So I think you didn't have to be one type of upgrade for this team to get a lot better. I think clearly Cleveland has the potential to be way better. And I also think there's this idea, we're already doing this. I'm building a straw man from Twitter basically, but there's some talk out there that, well, now Cleveland has got to be like an Eastern Conference finalist or be sure that it can re-sign Donovan Mitchell in 3 years, or this is a bad trade. I'm not on board with that. I think
Love
much
it.
like the Minnesota thing, like you alluded to, this is a team that has been at a pretty low level, albeit one that was climbing last year at least for a while. And so just getting into the mix, which I think this trade accomplishes, is valuable. And it, maybe that means you attract free agents. Maybe that just means, I don't know, you just improve the reputation. Just like the team's better. So I think that matters. The picks are a little scary, but that's just to get back to the Utah thing too. They're their side of it. Like that's just the market now, right? And shout out to Danny Ainge because he basically created an economy and then benefited from it. Like he set the market with the Gobert trade,
Or did
capitalized
Minnesota's
on.
at the market with with this economy?
Well, somebody, both parties said it, and then Ainge is just thinking like, well, this is what it costs now to get an all-star from us, and he got it. So the Utah side, everybody, it seems like we're getting some comments saying the Utah side was, a huge win. Like nobody's arguing that. This is phenomenal. I don't think Mitchell is going to stay in Utah. That seemed pretty clear. And so this return's great. Utah wins like 100%, no doubt. But I think the Cavs potentially win too. And where they fall in the East, I don't know. I just think they're better. They're more interesting. They're more exciting. They have at least offensively, one of the best players in the league now, next to a bunch of other guys that are going to develop. So I don't know. This is it's kind of like the Minnesota Utah thing is a win-win, I think. We'll just see. We'll see how good the Cavs end up becoming. I can't wait to see if we suddenly have like 6 finals contenders in the East now.
Right. And I like that you said that it doesn't need to be this sort of immediate ascension for them because Evan Mobley's 21, Darius Garland's 22, Jared Allen is 24, and Donovan Mitchell is going to turn 26 soon. Like this is very much like if you have the year cushion. The point about the wing though is like very salient. Okoro with the type of shots he's getting now, he did okay on corner 3-point shooting last year. Maybe that improves, but there is that absence now. And Akbaji was like, oh, can he be that shooter, but would be a liability on defense? This team's, I don't know. They could be a two-way terror right out of the gate, though. And I think that that's really scary. And I think, look, we talked about this when we were discussing the Timberwolves. If we want these teams in non-glamour markets or in the they don't have a top 5 player right now to believe that they have a chance at a title, or you want the league to have that parity, you absolutely want the Cavs and the Minnesota to just act as they did. And I don't think any of the moves were outright reckless. There's definitely an experimental element to whatever's going on in Minnesota. So there seems like there's more risk there. But I like that we're seeing these again, like the Cleveland's not like this super afterthought market, but just these non-glamour teams, non-flagship franchises going for it. And Donovan Mitchell's the rare star who just very much aligned with the timeline of what's still an unfinished Cleveland team. So I think it's a gamble, but it's worth the gamble. I like this move for Utah. And I will say, like, you don't make this trade though, unless you think Donovan Mitchell's going to leave by the end of this contract. Or you're looking at it as, okay, we've kind of shorted the futures of both Minnesota and Cleveland. One of those teams is going to end up being a disaster long-term because you're looking at in Minnesota, it's like this too. Like Anthony Edwards is still so young. Like their window is technically open-ended so long as he's there. With Cleveland, it's even more open-ended because of Garland, Allen, and Mobley just being so young. And so I think you make this trade with the belief that, no, I still don't think it's a failure if he doesn't. You have all these picks. Like you could flip those for assets later, get yourself as many bites at the draft apple as you possibly can. But it does feel like this is a move you make because you don't think that Donovan Mitchell is going to be in Cleveland longer than the next 3 years.
Yeah, which is like a pretty reasonable bet, right? He may be in New York in 2025 or whatever, 26 or whatever. And it may be, but again, we made this argument for the Gobert trade. I'm sorry if I'm repeating what you said. I just think if the Gobert thing goes sideways, you can trade Gobert for a first or 2 or something. And if the Mitchell thing goes sideways or it's very clear he's not going to stay, despite what he's saying now, I think you can move him again. You can flip. So like all these picks, they're going to theoretically out, by the way, which might not be that good. Like if Mitchell stays, look, Cleveland. So just take it from Cleveland's perspective, just back to that for a second. they picked Agbaji in the first round this year, and I don't think anyone, perceived that he would be like a real difference maker, right?
No, not right away.
So if they hadn't done the Mitchell trade, I think organic growth would have made it likely that the Cavs would have continued to pick someone in the Agbaji range or worse, right? Just because they're getting better, their picks getting lower. So I don't know. And now theoretically, they're going to be a lot better. At least, maybe the 25 pick is the only one that gets affected by Mitchell. So, unless he re-ups. So like there's opportunity costs. You could have used the first for something else, but like it can be true at the same time that Utah got a haul of first round picks. It can, just as Cleveland maybe didn't really give up that much of value if those picks are going to be in the 20s. So, getting out to 2029 or even 27, like who knows?
Terrifying.
But yeah, it's just impossible. But I love it. I think, do we, do you have anything else on Mitchell, Cleveland, or Utah, or do you want to like do 8 angry minutes on the Knicks?
I was going to say for Utah specifically, what did you think about there are players in this deal? Akbaji, I think, is just let's get a lottery pick, someone who profiles, who can shoot. I did want to get to this question from Phil. I put up on the screen before. Can you imagine a Cavs versus Lakers in the finals? Not likely. That'd be a crazy storyline. That really would. That'd be absolutely wild. Not outside the realm of possibility. Is it more likely as of today that the Lakers or the Cavs make the 2023 NBA Finals?
It's the Cavs, right?
Right. It's more likely that
Not really that close.
That's an incredible thing to say. But on the Jazz, getting Akbaji is fine. I would wonder, Larry Marketing provides some stretch, but they all of a sudden have like all these players who, Walker Kessler's there, but they all of a sudden have all these players where it's Jared Vanderbilt and Rudy Gay and Larry Marketing, who are not wings, but they're not centers. So they have to clear that up. I would expect more moves to follow is the other element of this. Like Bojan Bogdanovic, Mike Conley has to be, I would assume, would be on the move next. Even Malik Beasley could be up for grabs. What do you think, though, about Colin Sexton here? And I was going to say, and we kind of touched on this, but didn't get into detail with it, of the larger picture of they've decided that these returns are very much going to be built around draft picks rather than players. Because even with the Knicks and what happened with Barrett, just from what I know, and I firmly believe that Utah was not as enamored with RJ Barrett, even if they were willing to take him in a deal. I don't think it was, the Knicks are going to get to keep 3 firsts because we're getting RJ Barrett. I just don't think they viewed him that way. And so the Colin Sexton fit first is intriguing. I think we talked about Sexton on this 4 years and $72 million with the cap going up. If he stays healthy, has the potential to be like a really team friendly deal. But yeah, so that, and then obviously the pick thing that I just threw at you.
Yeah, I think just as like a blanket rule, if you're getting a player whose value is kind of like being suppressed by factors that don't have anything to do with how good he is, or are not entirely owing to how good he is, which is the case for Sexton, right? Like weird restricted free agency combined with an injury, combined with like, I don't know if this guy is someone we need to really pay because we're going to have to pay Mobley. We just paid Garland. There's all these external factors that have nothing to do with Sexton's ability, which like I'm not the highest on Sexton, but he's a 20-point scorer that can make a 3, that can be on the ball and off it and just has value, right? Like I think I may have been harsh in comparing him to current teammate Jordan Clarkson in the past, but I think he's more than that, and under 20 million a year comfortably. Really good deal. I think that's a movable deal. You could maybe trade him later down the line for positive value. I don't really understand what Utah would want to keep him around for. Yeah, we're getting a good John Doe comments that Sexton's going to put up crazy numbers, and then you can flip him to someone who thinks he's like a 28 points per game scorer. Pick up Colin Sexton in fantasy this year, by the way. I would also say going to get a bunch of buckets.
That's some great advice here.
Yeah, I don't play fantasy basketball, by the way, so don't listen to me. No, the idea of like a pick heavy package, I agree with you on Barrett and the Knicks side of this. I guess if you're Utah, I don't know, maybe you're persuaded by just the power position that a team like the Thunder is in with all those picks. You're persuaded by like the similarities market wise and I don't know, just the way that I guess Oklahoma City has sort of tolerated a pick centric rebuild. At least like you're not the first to really try to do this. So I think from a public perception standpoint, I think it's probably fine. I think from a team building standpoint, I guess maybe it remains to be seen if this is a viable strategy, because the Thunder haven't really, come out the other side of it yet. And I guess the Sixers, the process Sixers are the other example. And like, they really only kind of hit on one of all their machinations. So it's a risky thing. But I do think if you're only concerned with how do we rebuild a championship team, probably getting as many picks that have the potential to be in the top 5 or whatever is a reasonable way to go. And just in this specific instance, I'd rather have a bunch of picks than Barrett. I'd rather have a bunch of picks than, like, I don't know, whoever else might have been available from the Cavs. I don't know who that would even be, considering they kept everyone that really mattered.
Right. And that was why Cleveland was like, they were never looming in this, but like people talked about them as if the Jazz really didn't care about getting players. And so when you look back at it, I think it was just because everyone thought it was going to be the Knicks, and it very much seemed that way. And the Knicks, I guess the Knicks could have beaten this offer. And I don't want to make this all about the Knicks, but we'll get into them in a second. I guess the assumption was just that, I guess in hindsight, I'm like, well, why weren't we talking about Cleveland more? Was the assumption that the Jazz actually wanted to get, because they don't even have I like Colin Sexton, but when you're projecting forward, I'd rather have RJ Barrett than Colin Sexton. Like, they didn't have the blue chip prospect that they were willing to move. Otherwise, like, you're not going to give up Evan Mobley or Darius Garland to sign an extent. Like, you're not trading those guys for Mitchell. Part of the appeal is bringing in Mitchell to pair with them. So was it just we assumed, not, I mean, you, me, everyone, that Utah wanted like higher end players, or is it just no one thought that they would go this far into the draft pick? Well, and also the other win here, for just a small side note, is now their 2023 lotto protected pick is almost certainly going to convey. And so that's a win for Indiana. Is it not like that you just get another first round pick there? Unless it's not Indiana who has it anymore. I'll double check that. But no, it's in Indiana. So, but that was just a side. So I'm just curious, like, in hindsight, what do you think it was as to why, especially as Sexton remained unsigned, where that's kind of staring you right in the face? Yeah, base year compensation comes into play, but you knew he wasn't going to get like a max deal. So I almost feel like I'm going to say shame on me for not, like, I was talking about the Wizards, the Hornets, the Raptors. Shame on me for not really buying more into the Cavs threat element of this.
Yeah, I mean, and throw Memphis in there too. All we did for a bunch of the end of the season and beginning of the offseason was talk about all the ammo that Memphis had, right? Not necessarily in relation to getting Donovan Mitchell, but just as like they could go get a superstar if they wanted to. They have the bullets to fire at that. I don't know. I guess I think because there are a lot of other teams that could have done something like this, because, like, you know, the players are there. I think we agree they're all quality, but it really just came down to who's willing to give up essentially control of 5 drafts, of 5 first rounds. Like, that's
so many.
It's like a lot of teams could have done this, but I guess for me, it's just the most interesting side of it is what does Cleveland, you know what this is, as I think about it? This is like a huge vote of confidence for Mobley, because I think Garland is an all-star and might make a few more, but he's a small guard, and, you know, he's always going to have defensive problems. Allen is a non-stretch big who's also an all-star and really good, but you wouldn't do this, I don't think, if that's all you had, or even if the third piece of that wasn't quite as good as Mobley. And this might just be me like trying to justify why I'm so high on Mobley and impute that to the Cavs, but I think that's clear now, because you do this if you are confident that Donovan Mitchell might not even be your best player like this year or the year after, because you think Mobley is going to be Kevin Garnett, or like 90% of Kevin Garnett, or something like that. And there are people that think that, and I got to believe if you're around Mobley in the Cavs organization, the other thing that he's so renowned for is like his attitude, his work ethic, coach's son, like all that stuff. You probably think that he's your true cornerstone, and Mitchell is like your second option, or, you know, 2A with Garland and 2B. So that's the most interesting thing to me. And it only makes me more excited to kind of see like what the upgraded version of Mobley looks like this year, and then over the next 2 or 3, for as long as Mitchell is under contract there and they continue with this core. I think, yeah, the more I think about it, the more it comes back to Mobley. He was the key to the franchise before this trade, but I think he's also kind of quietly the key to justifying it going forward.
I agree with you that I don't think you make this deal if you anticipate Donovan Mitchell being your best player in 2 years. And that's just like, it was like we said with the Knicks, who we've been dancing around. We'll have to get to it. You're acquiring Donovan Mitchell because you're confident you're going to get his functional equal or superior, preferably down the line. And they already have like the realm of outcome for Darius Garland is he could be better than Donovan Mitchell. Like
Yeah.
that's eminently possible. I think and Mobley's the guy you look to where if we fast forwarded 5 years or 3-4 years and this core's still together, I would bet on him being the best player on the team. And that's why you make this trade. And Frederick Jeffy asked, do you think the Cavs are a threat in the Eastern Conference? We kind of went through this. The only teams that I feel like I'm kind of sure are definitely going to be better than them this year are Boston, Milwaukee, and I'm going to throw, I refuse to do anything with Brooklyn. I'm going to throw Philly in there. And I think that's it. Like, I think those are the only guarantees. I don't know how you feel about Miami and Brooklyn and Toronto, of course.
I think those are my three. Those are the first three I wrote down in order. Boston, Milwaukee, Philly, I think are better. Philly does come with some, like there's the Embiid injury hanging out there, or the breakdown. There's the Harden. I guess he'll be better, or maybe not. I don't know. But after that, yeah,
He's cut carbs. Did you see he threw a birthday cake off a boat? So he's clearly cut carbs.
Good for him. No, but yeah, it's a conversation at least with Toronto and Atlanta. I think Miami, we agree, got worse just by losing Tucker and not really doing a whole lot else. I think they're in it for sure. Are they? So if the question is, are they a threat? Yeah, like absolutely. They could beat Boston, Milwaukee, or Philly in a series potentially.
There's no like. I don't want to insult the Bucks it's the Bucks or the Celtics if you want to say, oh, there's a prohibitive favorite.
Yeah,
but there's not like no team can beat that. Like there's no team that feels like it can't be beat right now or would beat every single other team without issue in the East.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, I guess I don't even know who I'd pick among Boston and Milwaukee, but I actually think, nobody matches up well with Giannis, but the Cavs are going to have two long rim defenders that are, Giannis will just bulldoze, but at least there's some size in there. I think Garland and Mitchell could make, they're going to look, one of the biggest problems with the Bucks is they don't have, other than Middleton, like a great wing defender that you can trust. And Holiday is going to guard one of the two, probably Mitchell, who's chasing Garland around. Like, I don't know, that's going to be a problem for Philly too. Because assuming the Cavs upgrade on Okoro, which I think they have to, then James Harden has to guard somebody. If you can, so let's focus on this Donovan Mitchell trade and what Isaac Okoro means.
Hey, look, they need like you said, they need the two-way wing, and he's their best candidate on the roster, I guess. Now.
Yeah, no, I just don't know. I think they're in the mix for sure. I think we're getting another comment here about someone's not sure if Mobley's going to be that good offensively. I don't know. I trust the feel. I think, I don't know what he needs to do he's already a great player just based on the defense, I think, or is going to be a great player. But like his role in the offense is real easy now because you have two primary ball handlers that are going to make the lift pretty light. Like all he's got to do is move the ball a little bit, roll, offensive rebound. Like he's in a position now to just focus on the things offensively that he's already good at. And I think even if he doesn't make major strides, like he's just positioned to succeed and to capitalize on, his growth is still the most important thing in Cleveland, but like he doesn't have to do more than he's capable of already, which is like a pretty sweet spot to be in developmentally.
Also, I would argue, he'll be fine. I'd be worried about Okoro, who I felt like need the ball a little bit more. His off-ball shooting now is just so critical to how this team does. There also is, and you floated this, I'm not necessarily advocating it, but like, let's see what's happening around the trade deadline. Like, you're not out of asset powder just yet because Jarrett Allen is there. And if OG Anunoby became available and the Raptors are obsessed about getting a big, you mentioned an Allen for Anunoby swap. I don't know if that makes more or less sense now after the trade. It probably makes just as much sense, at least for the Cavs. I had two quick questions on Utah. Is who do you think is going to be like if you had to pinpoint the veteran that's going to be first moved off that roster? And do you think that the way this trade was done, that it kills the likelihood Russell Westbrook is now headed to Utah?
Oh, that's interesting. I think Bogdanovich probably goes next. That's
my guess too.
He's easier to trade than Conley. I think there's more of a market for him. And then I just don't know what's going to happen with Russell Westbrook. Like I do think, I don't know, maybe are you going to flip Sexton and somebody else to the Lakers for Westbrook and get like those 2 extra firsts, and I just don't know. We're gonna have to. What a weird emergency pod that's gonna be when Westbrook finally gets traded.
I think it makes it less likely that he goes to the Jazz, or maybe he makes it more likely that he's in Cleveland, in LA to start the season and gets moved in the middle of the year, where perhaps the compensation to get off him isn't as much. I just don't think the Jazz are still interesting in theory because you have Beasley expiring, Bogdanovich expiring. I think they would take on Conley. Like Sexton could eventually be moved in January, I think, at this point, or whatever it is. But like that would be if Sexton and let's say Malik Beasley are still there. Like, are you giving and marketing? Like, that's a player that probably helps the Lakers too. So I wouldn't rule it out. I do think it's sort of like maybe it's Pacers or bust or something, or are the Lakers trying to wait and see if things still burn down in Brooklyn for Kyrie? But Utah's certainly not done. And I think to put a bow before we get what is going to be a defense of the Knicks from me, like Bogdanovich should probably get them a first round pick. I thought about like, what would you have to grease? One of my favorite destinations, like Toronto's up there, would be interesting for him. But Miami, needing someone in that 4 spot, how much do you need to attach to Duncan Robinson to get Bojan Bogdanović in Miami?
I mean, it's got to be a first just because of Robinson's contract, I think. But I think and I think I probably do that if I'm Utah, by the way. I'm taking kind of whatever first I can get for a guy that just isn't part of your big picture plans anymore, and you've got to eat some money. So,
Adam Frommel, we have no idea who that is. Am I pronouncing it right? Says Frank Ntilikina really needs to end up in Utah so he could lead the tank. False, because if he goes to Utah, the tank is ruined. They'll be too good. So we know that that's not a regular listener who has any ties to the pod because he doesn't understand how good.
What a shot! What a shot at you! Just really.
Look, let's talk Knicks.
Yeah,
the RJ Barrett stuff that was floating around already. They signed him to an extension. When I guess it seemed like an offer was close and Utah backed out. What do you make? Are you prepared to defend the Knicks here the way that I am?
Well, partially. So from here, it seems like I think it's probably objectively the right decision for the Knicks specifically to not give up the kind of draft equity that Cleveland did. Because you said it like early on, the Knicks just the Knicks just aren't in a position to sacrifice their future first round picks. They're not. The upside isn't there. It's not like they have a Garland and a Mobley and an Allen to like insulate them through organic growth from those picks potentially being super valuable. And we're talking unprotected again. And so like it just takes one disaster and you've given up the number 1 pick potentially. So I think that's the right decision. What makes strange for me is that, and this is a little bit like what we discussed and what a lot of people discussed with the Brunson situation, is it's like it doesn't seem to fit into a bigger vision of what this team wants to do, because they kind of, they acquired a bunch of picks on draft. They got all this, they made a bunch of moves and it felt like kind of just shuffling deck chairs, but they emerged with more draft equity to use for something. Like maybe it was going to be the Mitchell trade. I think, it was very reasonable to think Mitchell was going to be on the Knicks. I think everyone expected that, and now he's not. And so now what was that all for? It's just a lack of like a bigger cohesive picture, which I know is your big gripe with the team. So sorry if I stepped on it, but it's complicated for the Knicks. They shouldn't have given up what it took to get Mitchell, but since they didn't, like, what's the plan?
Yeah. So, very quickly towards the Russell Westbrook stuff, something we didn't mention, and I just realized it's probably just very unlikely because now the Jazz are hard capped after acquiring Sexton in the sign and trade. Just a wrinkle there. So I'm pretty much with you on all you said. I don't think it makes what they did this offseason needless. We went through, if you go back to the Knicks report card, where we were fairly critical. Their mode of, like, when you look at everything in sum, they didn't do anything detrimental. And if you have all these picks stashed in the deck, you're still ready to go out and get another star. My biggest gripe with them is still, I don't think they should have done all this just to sign Jalen Brunson because they're not at that level. I'd rather be bad, be gradual, and they were very much still trying to skip a step. I still don't necessarily agree with like that mindset. And this is the danger of that, because everyone knows how, in theory, because they clearly weren't, how desperate you are to get Donovan Mitchell or that star since you did all this. But I also don't think, and I just discussed this on the Knicks Film School podcast Wednesday or whatever day it was, I don't think the Knicks thought Donovan Mitchell was going to become available this summer. Otherwise, I would expect Jalen Brunson not to be part of the plan, although I guess his ties, like familial ties to the organization, trounce that a little bit. But like, you shouldn't have been matching this offer, because the Cavs we just talked about are a threat in the East where you can, let's like even just keep it basic and generalized. Their path to being a top 4 team in the East and more than that is exceedingly clear. If you trade for Donovan Mitchell and you're the Knicks, that path with the roster that would have been left over is not only blurry at best, but if you had matched this package, you have nothing left to go out and get that next star. You would need RJ Barrett to develop into the type of centerpiece that could net you a star on his own, in which case, why are you trading RJ Barrett at that point? And so there's a certain ambiguity to what the Knicks would have been with Mitchell, even if they got him like affordably. Like if you looked at it and said, oh, they only gave up 2 or 3 unprotected firsts and Obi Toppin and then a crappy or 2 firsts where they still had stuff left over. Like there still would have been an issue there, but if you matched this, which is essentially, look, it's the control of 6 draft picks when you factor in Akbaji, that just would have been mega difficult to then go out and make another splashy transaction. And so we can make fun of them for acquiring those picks, only not to use them. But the idea behind those picks, aside from maybe wanting a first in the chamber in case you get docked one for tampering with Jalen Brunson, is you wanted to have picks for 2 stars, basically, for 2 really big trades. And you removed yourself from the table by extending RJ Barrett. I still just don't believe, if Utah wanted Barrett, I just firmly believe it was they thought they were going to get multiple first-round picks to flip him. I don't think they wanted to deal with his next contract. I think his contract now, 4 years, $107 million guaranteed, is fine, but like that's still a pretty steep increase from Sexton. So I'm totally fine that they walked away from the table here. If you want to take issue, because the way I look at it as, if you liked the Jalen Brunson trade, like signing, you shouldn't hate it now because they didn't get Donovan Mitchell. I don't think that was something that was done with the hope of getting a Mitchell. And if you didn't like the Jalen Brunson trade signing, like Mitchell might have made you like it a little bit more or maybe a little bit less, depending on how you feel about that backcourt, but you're not going to feel any differently now. The thing to actually criticize the Knicks for would be if like them chaining themselves to this sub-mediocre trajectory in the East right now. And they still have the assets to change that, but I don't think just because you don't have a clear path to being better than okay, that you need to then give up everything for Donovan Mitchell, who, frankly, I think is an incredibly good player. Based on the interactions I've had with fans from other teams throughout this, he is underrated for what he does offensively, but is he an all-NBA talent? Like caliber, yes. Can you guarantee he's going to be all NBA bound or an all NBA contender year in and year out? No, he's not. He's probably like top 20, maybe a little bit outside that. And so you don't go into this like if you look back, the Carmelo Anthony trade package was like in the end, not an absurd amount, but like in real time, knowing what they had offered and for James Dolan to come in and them up it, you can't like criticize the Knicks for giving up and too much and losing in trades and then criticize them for being too conservative. Feel free to criticize them for not being creative enough or just inspirational with their trajectory by going out and getting Brunson at a time where it kind of would have made more sense to continue along the gradual route and be bad.
Yeah, I think from the Knicks side of this, a couple things like just distinguish this from the Cleveland situation. The first is, as you mentioned, with respect to Cleveland, if you're getting Donovan Mitchell, you better be pretty confident that he's not going to be your best player going forward. And for the Knicks, I think he clearly would have been the team's best player. And getting him at anything close to this price would have foreclosed on a lot of opportunities to go get that guy, because you're out a bunch of picks. You're spending a ton of money. You're probably hoping you re-sign him at a giant max level, and so now you're like he's it. He is going to be the be all end all for your franchise for a very long time. And like, maybe he has that level in him. I think we both agree that he probably doesn't, but just the fact that it narrows so severely that the Knicks, hypothetically, their avenues towards being as good as, say, the Cavs might be like even just this year, then it's the price was just too high. It took away way too many options for a team that, like, I mean, I don't know. I just think like the Knicks would not have made as much sense just on the floor this year either, because you don't have the Allen Mobley sort of, safety net back there because Mitchell and Brunson,
just to get out in front of this, because I've seen certain Knicks fans like to compare Mitchell Robinson from everyone to Rudy Gobert to Robert Williams to Jared Allen. That dude is one of the least dynamic offensive players in the league. And so it's not Allen, it's not Mobley, it's not Gobert, it's not Robert Williams. He's not it. I don't mean to say it. I apologize there.
Well, and just defensively too, he's not on. I mean, he's not on Gobert's level. Like almost nobody is. We're talking about Robinson, and like I like Mobley way better like today as a defender than Robinson, let alone like what he's going to potentially become. So, yeah, I think I'm with you. It kind of sucks for Knicks fans because like you maybe thought you were going to get Donovan Mitchell and now you aren't. But it's one of those things where it's probably for the best, assuming they put those picks that didn't get traded to use, that they, kind of build sensibly going forward and start to show more of a plan. But yeah, I think we would have been negative, I think pretty down on the Knicks side of this if they'd given up a similar package.
It just would have been failing them, just outperforming expectations. I do think what this does kind of say though, is you can say, oh, star X is not going to get this. Did it with Rudy Gobert, did it with Donovan Mitchell. This is now the star trade market. And so if you are the Knicks, the idea of trading for 2 stars does become a little implausible in general. And it makes it that much more important that RJ Barrett was already as of right now, was already the most important player in that building to them. And now he's even more important because you don't make a trade like this unless you have him. And the Cavs had more than someone on RJ Barrett's level. They had like 3 guys who are ready to win now, all-star level players. You have to sort of recalibrate now and see, is really going after 2 stars via trade even feasible? If you think there's going to be a free agency renaissance, then maybe it's different with the cap going up and the way we know certain players can't extend. So you could view it that way, but it makes it that much more important to get the star in place, either free agency or through the draft or development in RJ Barrett, and to know you have him and make that move later. Making this move first makes it that much harder to acquire the second or third guy, however you're trying to figure it. And I do think that's maybe an outcome that they didn't necessarily foresee to all of this.
Yeah, I think the big picture implications of this are really interesting in terms of like, is there going to be a market correction where, because up until recently, it didn't take you 5 first rounders, including swaps, to get a good player, to get an all-star. And you've got the Murray trade and you've got Gobert, and now you've got this one. I guess you could go back to Drew Holiday, but that was a unique set of circumstances. Where like, is that going to continue? Or, and I guess I'll answer my own question. I think probably that's going to be how it is, because I don't feel like we're going to see Cleveland and Minnesota find themselves totally screwed if this goes bad, because one has Anthony Edwards and one has Evan Mobley
and Garland.
So like, I think if the Knicks had done this and it had gone bad, I think maybe what you would have seen is a return to a priority on free agency for talent acquisition versus giving up a bunch of picks. Because if that goes bad, the floor is a low. For the 2 teams most recently that have made big trades with Utah and given up all these picks, the floor is kind of high just because you've got talent that's there, that's ready to keep the team at least decent and interesting if these trades don't work. So we're going to see the market change, but it might not happen like for 3 or 4 years, because these 2 test cases I don't think are going to change much.
Yeah, my final thought on the Knicks is I thought if they didn't get Donovan Mitchell, that then you should immediately pivot into trying to get Russell Westbrook. I just can't. The more I think about it, I can't envision them even getting one of the Lakers first for Fournier and Randall type package. Like Rose, there's the expiring there. Lance in the chat says Cavs are now a top what team in the league. We already discussed this, but we probably have them as like a top 10 team next year. Or I mean, the West is deep. It's top 12. Like they're going to be a top 6 team in the East, I think. So let's just say top 12.
Yeah. I think they have a chance to finish like second or third potentially. But I feel like something has gone very wrong if they're worse than if they're in the play-in. I think they should be clear of the play-in, which is kind of a big deal. I mean, that matters now.
Yeah, no, that is a big deal. And so I don't know necessarily where the Knicks go from here, but I think I am impressed that they drew a line in the sand. And kind of the way negotiations were going, you might have expected that. I really thought, given the way the RJ stuff was reported, they were going to end up giving a bunch of picks and pull we really wanted to keep RJ, and this is what it took to keep RJ card. So I was wrong on that framing, or maybe they planned to do it and just got outbid. But if you're a Knicks fan, yeah, it's fine to be disappointed that you didn't get Donovan Mitchell. I ultimately think if this was the going rate, it makes sense for the Cavs to pay it. It does not make sense for the Knicks to have paid it. I know you need to get out of here. Is there anything that you would like to add, though?
No, that I think that sums it up great. Like, this isn't an objectively good trade. It's a good trade for the Cavs with what they had and what they paid in this particular set of circumstances. And I think we should probably look at trades generally more that way. Just like
Just like we have to look at the contracts differently, like RJ in the image of the cap going up. Like we have to now recalibrate what the superstar market is. And it's, we can call these win-wins. It's probably more so since we have to evaluate these eventually in hindsight. It's like defensible for both sides, because if we look back and like one of these teams is probably going to end up being the big winner. Either the Cavs like don't do well, Mitchell leaves, and maybe they just never like escape mediocrity and the Jazz are getting primo picks, or they're just sending like back a bunch of like mid to late 20s to the Jazz because they are so good, and Utah's like, well, they never really got that much for Don Mitchell. But I think the way the framework ended up based off where both teams were going and are headed now, it was just a defensible deal for both sides. Eminently defensible.
Risk reward analysis makes sense on both sides. I think they're all aware of like how this could go sideways or how it could pay off. I think everybody's going in eyes open, and like, yeah, down the line, it might not be so great for one, but I think both sides have totally like credible defenses to why they did this right now.
And Cleveland immediately shoots up the league pass ranking. It's just them in Minnesota I'm so fascinated by now.
Oh my God, yeah, for sure.
Grant, this was great. Thank you for hopping on. If this is your first time checking us out, follow me and Grant on our socials, which are on screen, at GT_Hughes for him, at Tampa Valley for me. And most importantly, subscribe to this podcast on both YouTube and on Spotify or Apple so we continue to move up the charts. Until next time, and like always, we leave you with a shout out to the one, the only, a player who absolutely, despite what some random person in the comments says, cannot lead a tank job because he's too good, Frank Ntilikina.